everyone. Good luck at your meeting. And again, thanks so much to everybody for joining. We're going to get started right away. So I'd like to ask Sarah Atkins to kick us off with an introduction of our speaker this evening. Sarah?
Hi, everybody. Khadija Kenner is a Westchester, Pennsylvania native and Temple graduate. Energized by the 2016 elections, she took a hiatus from TV production and went back to work as a field and digital organizer with the North Carolina Democratic Party's coordinated campaign. Following the elections, Khadija moved back to Pennsylvania and currently lives in Harrisburg, while she works for the Pennsylvania Budget and Policy Center as the director of We the People Pennsylvania campaign and Why Courts Matter Pennsylvania. Why Courts Matter is a nonpartisan coalition of organizations and advocates working to ensure our federal courts are filled with diverse, independent, well-qualified, mainstream jurists who are dedicated to fairness and impartiality, and keeping with the core constitutional values of liberty, equality, and justice for all. I met Khadija through this work 2 or so years ago and have learned a wealth of knowledge from her. Thank you, Khadija, for joining the Democratic Committee of Lower Merion and Narberth for our Informed Voter Speaker Series.
Great. Thank you so much, Sarah. And Khadija, before you kick it off, let me just say we are trying to save some time for questions at the end. If you have questions for Khadija, please put them in the chat box and we'll get to as many as we can at the end. And Khadija, feel free to take it away and share your screen.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that introduction, Sarah. What Sarah didn't mention is that we are prison buddies. We've been locked up together before, trying to push back on some problematic judicial confirmations in the federal state courts. So good to see you, Sarah, and thank you for that introduction. Good to see all of you. I want to see your faces here while I still have you. So as mentioned, my name is Khadija, and I've been doing this work with Why Courts Matter for just almost 4 years now. As mentioned previously, I worked in TV production. So any of you who watched last night's inauguration and you saw how beautiful that was, I had to give a shout out to all the folks behind the scenes that put that inauguration together last night. That was beautiful. So I want to talk up to you about an issue that you all probably heard about a little bit. Some of you joined a town hall earlier today that happened at 5:30. And so I want to make sure that I get a really good opportunity with you tonight to talk about an important issue. And I'm here tonight with the Lower Merion Dems. So I think I'm like at home here. I can feel free to talk and be real with you. Is that what you're looking for tonight? A real conversation about this issue tonight? All right, I don't have to hold back too much. That's good. Why Courts Matter is a nonpartisan organization, which means I'm not going to tell you who to vote for and who not to vote for, but we will talk about issues. And that means we can talk about politics as that happens, because that's important to do in this conversation. So I'm going to pull up a PowerPoint and I'm going to go through a whole bunch of slides with you, but we're going to take those slides down and have a really good conversation. I feed off of your energy. So those of you who are good on this Zoom thing and you know how to use the emojis and you know how to clap hands and put celebration signs up and you like something I'm talking about, give me the thumbs up so I can keep going along that line. I appreciate that. And any of you who don't have your video on and want to turn that on, I'd love to see your faces too. All right, so I'm going to pull up a PowerPoint presentation. And first, I'm going to start off by giving just the backdrop of Courts 101. I'm just going to show you these 3 appellate courts that are currently under attack to give you an understanding about those. A lot of us haven't had a civics lesson since maybe the 10th grade, maybe sophomore year in college. So we're going to take you back to federalism for a minute. You can Google that if you want. And we'll talk about that. And then we're going to talk about House Bill 38 and how you, Lower Merion Dems, can fight back against a very problematic bill that we're going to fight back for. Okay, so I'm going to pull my PowerPoint. All right, can someone just come off mute and tell me you can see this okay?
We can see it. Looks great.
All right, great. All right, so here we go. We're going to talk about why courts matter. So as mentioned, the work that I've done previously mostly revolved around the federal courts and stopping the Trump administration from confirming several problematic nominees, which he had the success in doing. More than 200 judges were confirmed in his 4 years in office. But tonight we're going to talk about Pennsylvania state courts. And going back, like I said, the Civics 101 lesson, because of federalism, we have both the federal government and each state government have their own court systems. The state courts are the final arbiters of state laws and the state constitutions. Their interpretation of federal law or the US Constitution may be appealed to the United States Supreme Court. There are levels to this, right? So here's a hierarchy. You have your minor courts and your common pleas courts, your trial courts, where most cases are heard. The overwhelming majority of all cases are heard at these two levels. The next up is the intermediate appellate courts, your superior court and your Commonwealth Court. We're going to talk about those. And then the final is the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. Just like the United States Supreme Court, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court doesn't hear lots of cases. So you might have had better luck winning that Powerball and you did get in your case heard in the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. I want to show you who currently is sitting on the Superior Court. I want you to get a good look at this graphic so you can see. This is who's currently sitting on our Superior Court. There's typically only 15 judges on this bench, but there are some senior judges in this picture, if you're wondering why there's more than 15 people there. But this court was founded in 1895. It's one of the two intermediate appellate courts that I showed you, the other being the Commonwealth Court. It's going to hear cases around criminal cases, civil rights cases, civil cases. It has 15 judges. There's currently one vacancy on this bench. So there are only 14 judges currently sitting on this bench. They serve 10-year terms. You elect them in a partisan election. And then there are retention votes that we'll get in a second. But there are 7 Democrats and 7 Republicans currently sitting on the Superior Court. And if you take a good look at this picture, you can see that there's a pretty good amount of women sitting in the Superior Court. Pennsylvania does a great job putting women on the bench. But if you look more closely, you see there's only one person of color, Judge Carolyn Nichols. She is the only person of color who sits on every single appellate court bench seat. There's 31 judges, only one of 30, because there's the vacancy, is a person of color. That's like 4%. We can do a lot better than 4% here in the state of Pennsylvania. I want to just kind of humanize, these courts for you for a second. We know as Pennsylvanians and statewide that we appreciate the judiciary branch. There's at that co-equal branch of government. When the executive branch might let us down or the legislative branch might let us down and we lose trust, we have trust in our judiciary branch. It polls very well. But some folks, and myself included, didn't know what kind of cases were heard by a Superior Court or what kind of case was heard by a Commonwealth Court here in Pennsylvania. Well, here's an example for you. This is a Westmoreland County resident, or former resident, I should say, little JR. JR wanted to follow in his footsteps of his father and become a junior firefighter. But just a few months shy of his 14th birthday, JR was killed by a friend who, after unloading the clip from his father's handgun, unwittingly shot JR with a chambered bullet. And so in September of 2020, the Pennsylvania Superior Court found that the Federal Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act, PLCAA, to be unconstitutional, which allowed for JR's family to seek accountability and justice in his death. So that's an example of a case that will be heard in Superior Court. The next court is our Pennsylvania Commonwealth Court, and these are the folks who currently sit on that bench. And this court was founded in 1968. It is the other of the two intermediate appellate courts. It is uniquely Pennsylvanian. You won't see this anyplace else. It is a Pennsylvania Commonwealth Court. It only hears state government and government agency cases. Again, 10-year terms. After they've been elected to a 10-year term, then you have the opportunity to retain these judges. And so how that retention looks is that when you get to your ballot box, you'll see that there'll be someone's name listed. You won't see an R or a D afterwards. You'll just see a judge's name and a yes or no, and you can vote to retain that judge or not. That's what happens after they've been first put on the bench during an election, in a partisan election. There are 9 judges who sit on the Pennsylvania Commonwealth Court, and 7 Republicans and 2 Democrats. Again, a good amount of women on the bench. Here's an example of kind of cases that are heard by the Commonwealth Court. This is Miss Lorraine Hall. She's a Philadelphia resident. She was one of the plaintiffs in the 2019 lawsuit against the ballot question involving Marsy's Law that happened before the election. And Lorraine lost both her brother and son to crime. She also has gone through the criminal justice system herself. And so on January 7th of 2021, the Commonwealth Court ruled that Marsy's law was unconstitutional and invalidated the referendum votes, stating that the law was trying to change too many things at once. So those of you who voted yes or no on that referendum question just 2 years ago, just know that your votes were invalidated. This will probably be appealed to another court, but I just wanted to point this out to you tonight. All right, the final of the appellate courts here in Pennsylvania is the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. Founded in 1722, it's the oldest court in the United States. The highest appellate court in Pennsylvania. There's 7 justices who sit on this bench. Again, 10-year terms, and then you can vote to retain them or not. And then this is also a partisan election, the first time that they are elected to the bench. There are 5 Democrats and 2 Republicans who sit here on this bench. You'll see the gentleman in the center, Justice Saylor. He is retiring. We get to vote for someone different coming up in May in the primary and again in November. And then to the right, we have Justice Todd, who's going to replace him as the Chief Justice. She'll become the first woman Chief Justice on the Pennsylvania Supreme Court in history. And those Chief Justices are selected by their amount of time in position. So seniority makes them a Chief Justice or not. One of the cases that the Supreme Court heard involved this young lady, Kiara Tucker. She's a Delaware County resident, and she never received her mail-in ballot. So when she got to the voting booth in November, she had to vote with a provisional ballot, like we always say to do, right? Never leave the ballot, never leave the voting polls without voting. So she filled out a provisional ballot. She then later received a letter in the mail stating that her ballot and her right to vote was being challenged. And because Pennsylvania Supreme Court rejected that attempt to contest the provisional ballots and mail-in ballots, Kiara's ballot and voice was heard and her vote counted. So that's just a wrap up of the Pennsylvania appellate courts to give you an understanding of what we're trying to protect. So now I bring to you House Bill 38, and I'm sure you've heard lots of noise about that. If anyone has a question, I can't really see your chat box right now, but if anyone has a question about the courts, we'll get to that in a moment. But I want to get to this House Bill 38. That's what you all came here to talk about tonight. So let's just get into it. So, you know, when we talk about protecting the independence of our judiciary, we have to talk about our principles of an independent and accountable judiciary. You know, why is it that we love the judiciary branch so much and maybe sometimes don't care too much about that legislative branch? Well, we know that it's an abstract idea. This is where people go for justice. It may be one of the better days of your life, or maybe it's not a great day in your life. But if you're getting the justice served to you, you appreciate this judiciary branch. And we need to make sure that it is, number one, impartial, free from the conflicts of interest and any undue influence. What else makes for a good judiciary? It follows clearly defined rules of behavior. It's ethical. It's also fairly selected. It's selected in as fair and an impartial way as possible, where the process is insulated from political pressures. And it's transparent. It operates with full disclosure of a judge's financial obligations and ties, interest tying to influence or to elect this judge, and how judges are selected. Wouldn't we want to know if this judge owes lots of money to Russia, right, as a certain somebody else? Evaluated and monitored. Performance is regularly evaluated by a neutral, nonpartisan, non-interested group. Resourced, that it's publicly funded and fully funded and protected. My day job is with the Pennsylvania Budget and Policy Center, where I serve as director of campaigns. So I'll be talking a lot about the Pennsylvania budget. We are going to have a multi-billion-dollar budget gap this coming year. And how do we usually handle a budget gap? We get into austerity mode and we cut back on social programs, or we cut back on educational funding. We need to make sure we don't cut back in the funding of our courts as well. And then discretion has the ability to make appropriate decisions, accounting for specific circumstances, such as sentencing, bail, and early release. So I have a video here that I want to show you that's going to break down what judicial districting is, otherwise known as judicial gerrymandering. And what better way to break this down than to show you a cartoon video about it, a whiteboard video, so you can simply understand what judicial gerrymandering or judicial districts really is. And those of you who grew up in my era or earlier, you know what Schoolhouse Rock is. So let's see if we're a little similar to that.
Hey, Pennsylvania. You know how we've been fighting gerrymandering, where politicians draw legislative maps that give them an unfair advantage and take away democratic power from voters? Well, those same politicians want to do the same thing to our judicial elections. Judicial gerrymandering changes how we elect judges to our state's highest courts, including the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. We elect judges statewide today. A proposed constitutional amendment would give legislators the power to create districts to elect judges. And just as they gerrymander legislative maps to favor their preferred candidates, legislators would do that with judicial districts as well. So why is this so bad? It's pretty simple. Judicial districts are a solution in search of a problem. Look at our judges and justices, and you will see that they are from all over the state. But electing judges in districts could make it more difficult to put the best qualified judges on the bench in particular elections in the future. We want the best qualified candidates from the state to be judges in our courts, no matter where they are from. There is no Montgomery County or Elk County way to interpret statutes and the Pennsylvania Constitution. Most importantly, electing judges in legislator-drawn districts would undermine the independence of the courts and the separation of powers. Allowing legislators to influence who gets on our courts would enable them to influence the decisions they make, undermining the checks and balances so critical to our Constitution. Our appellate courts make major decisions regarding civil liberties and rights, educational funding, environmental protection, and gerrymandering itself. We must protect the independence of our courts.
All right, I hope you liked that video. I hope it explained it to you, and we'll have access to this. Give the access to this so you have this to share. All right, so I'm gonna move on. I want to get into now the landscape of where we are with this bill. And so I'm going to take my screen down because I need to see your faces and see your reaction as we talk about this issue so we can keep it real. But we're going to talk about the attacks on democracy and the independent judiciary from a historical and a recent perspective. We'll also talk about why this bill is problematic and where this bill is now and how you can stop it. So I'm going to stop my screen share. Hey, everybody, good to see you again. All right. Before I get into this, I know, Stephanie, I just want to make sure that there's no burning question that folks have before I get into talking about this landscape. Any question about the courts themselves?
Things come up in the chat, and the one question somebody had already was answered. So I think you're good to keep moving. And again, people put your questions in the chat, and as you can see, we'll take time along the way and at the end to get to them. Great. All right. So that last PowerPoint slide I had up talked about the attacks on democracy from an independent judiciary from the standard of historically and current. So I'm going to take you back, and I'm looking at the faces out here, and some of you may remember this. I'm going to take you back to United States Supreme Court and Chief Justice Earl Warren. Anybody remember Chief Justice Earl Warren? All right, Chief Justice Earl Warren was doing a job. He was overturning Jim Crow laws, ensuring that we could break bread together and go to the same schools, and all those good things were happening under his leadership on the bench. Well, there were some elected officials very upset with Chief Justice Judge Earl Warren, with those decisions he was making. Very upset to the point that they wanted to impeach him. You could drive down the highway and you could see signs with his picture on it and saying, "Impeach Justice Earl Warren." I see Ron shaking his head. He remembers that. That is what they want to do here in Pennsylvania. That's what our state legislature wants to do. A couple of years ago, our Supreme Court ruled that our legislative maps were gerrymandered to hell. Remember that? And the Pennsylvania Supreme Court ruled that they were unconstitutional and they had to draw some new maps. Well, who did that upset? If we're being real, that upset some folks, that we were going to have constitutionally drawn maps here in Pennsylvania. So what did they want to do? They wanted to impeach our Pennsylvania Supreme Court justices, Representative Chris Dush out in Punxsutawney land. He was interested in that, wanting to impeach
our Pennsylvania Supreme Court justices, bringing articles of impeachment up against them for the decisions that they were making. That was the initial attack on our democracy, or the initial attack on our independent branch of government, when the legislative branch wanted to have and exert their power over the independent branch of the judiciary. Well, we fought back against that. Good government groups like Common Cause, League of Women Voters, and the Pennsylvania Budget and Policy Center through the Why Courts Matter campaign, we joined together to fight back against that and brought attention to that. Well, they stopped those talks, although they brought them back up again about impeaching justices every time a decision happens they don't like. They talk about trying to mess with our courts and mess with the judges who sit on those courts. And if we think about what happened in that US Capitol just 2 weeks ago, and how our democracy was under attack by insurgents, we know as Pennsylvanians that what happened with our election, our free and fair election here in Pennsylvania, was called to question. And we had US senators from all over the country worried about Pennsylvania and worried about our election and worried about how we cast our ballots and worried about this and that, from Ted Cruz to Hawley and everyone else, concerned about what us Yankees were over here doing with our election, right? Well, that has carried over to our Pennsylvania state legislature. Some of those who actually sent buses to help those folks get there to the US Capitol, right? So they still are under the assumption that we haven't had a free and fair election. I don't know if you read anything about Representative Metcalf today, or you saw one from, I'm gonna see if I can pull this up on Twitter real fast, because it was something else. It was this gentleman here, Doug Mastriano, Senator Doug Mastriano, the one that actually paid for some buses to send people to the US Capitol 2 weeks ago. This is what he said: taking advantage of mail-in voting, the governor, State Department secretary, and a rogue Supreme Court unlawfully set conditions without legislative approval. This is what they're doing. They're attacking our judiciary for the decisions that they made, for ensuring that our election was free and fair and that your votes counted. They're upset. This is a power grab. They've been doing this for years. And now we have Representative Russ Diamond out of Lebanon County, just a little whiles away from me here, who want to take the power away from us, the constituents, disenfranchise us, and give the power to them to draw legislative maps so that they can dictate where judges sit and which judges we get to vote for. Currently, there are 31 judges who can sit on the appellate courts. We currently get to vote for all 31. If you're maybe 30, you've been voting in Pennsylvania for 30 years or more, you've probably voted or you voted against some of these judges who sit on the bench. You got to vote for all 31. Well, what does Russ Diamond want to do? He wants you to only be able to vote for one on each of the appellate courts. So you get to vote for one on the Supreme Court, one on the Commonwealth, and one on Superior. So instead of voting for 31 judges, you'd only get to vote for 3. I'll tell you what, if right now we're going along with voting for our judges and not having merit selection, then I want to vote for all 31, not just the 3 that Russ Diamond tells me I can vote for in the map that Russ Diamond draws up to his liking. Okay, this is where we are with that. That's the landscape of the attacks on our independent judiciary. Number 2, why is this bill problematic? I like to go over some of the myths and the facts as it relates to House Bill 38. Russ Diamond will tell you that he wants to bring geographic diversity to our appellate courts. Okay, but he didn't say geographic at first, he just said diversity. But let me tell you, Russ Diamond does not mean racial diversity. He doesn't mean gender diversity. He's talking about geographic diversity. And I'm here to tell you, there is no geographic diversity issue on our appellate courts. Russ Diamond had to pull back to 50 years ago to find out how these judges, where these judges live. So when you go back 50 years, yeah, a lot of these judges came out of Philly and Pittsburgh 50 years ago. But currently, as we are right now in 2021, these judges come from all over the place. All right. So in Pennsylvania, 22% of all Pennsylvanians live in Philadelphia or Pittsburgh, right? The big cities. That's where most Pennsylvanians live. 22% live in those 2 cities. 30% of our judges also live in those 2 cities. That's pretty good parity, right? Do you agree with that? That's pretty good parity. So when someone says that all these judges are coming out of Pittsburgh and coming out of Philly, that's just not accurate. Dauphin County, for instance, has 3 on just one of the courts. So what's going to happen to these judges? Do they lose their jobs? Do we need to build new courthouses in Elk County? How much money is that going to cost you as the taxpayer? What happens with retention voting? Does the judge need to move from Philadelphia and move to Elk County, buy a house so they can still stay as a judge? We don't know, because the company law or legislation that goes along with House Bill 38 is non-existent. We just don't even know how they want to do this. This is just their attempt to pull power, grab the power, retain the power, and take it away from the judiciary. So we're not going to stand for that. More reasons of why this is problematic. Again, there is no gender diversity issue on the bench. We do a great job. More than 60% are women. That's not a problem. What I want to highlight for you is that there is another state that votes currently the way that Russ Diamond wants us to vote, and that's Illinois. So for more than 50 years, Illinois has been voting for their highest court by districts. Now, Illinois is a state that is more than 40% people of color, more than 40% people of color. Yet, they've only had one justice to sit on that bench of color at a time. So when Russ Diamond says to you that by having our courts broken up in districts is going to help people of color get elected to the bench, that's not what has happened historically. The other states that vote for judges this way are former slave states: Kentucky, Mississippi, Louisiana. They had to vote that way because they were violating the VRA. And so they had to break up the way in which they elected judges to go along with how they were mistreating African Americans and others in terms of voting down south. There's no real reason for us to break up the way we are currently electing our judges to make Russ Diamond happy. There's no good reason. The other argument that people will say to you when you talk about this issue is that this is an opportunity to get the money out of the courts. It's too expensive to run a race to be a judge anymore, right? They'll say, oh, this will help make sure that we don't have these dark money sources coming into the state and taking over our elections. Well, let me tell you what happened in Illinois, right? Because Illinois is the closest to what they want to do here in Pennsylvania. In Illinois, they had the most expensive Supreme Court race in history, okay? And it wasn't even a election. It was for retention. It cost, let me see if I still have this number. In 2020, they had an estimate, $10.7 million. $10.7 million was spent in a 2020 anti-retention campaign. 4.5 million of that 10.7 came from one billionaire named Ken Griffin, a hedge fund owner. So if I'm a wealthy individual and I want to buy a judge, I can put $4.5 million into a small district in Elk County and Centre County and buy that judge. So when someone says this is going to take the money out of running for this office, that's not the case. The other thing is you have a lot of influence over the media market. It's expensive to buy an ad in Philadelphia or Pittsburgh if you want to run a 30-second ad on TV. It's a lot cheaper in Johnstown. It's a lot cheaper in Bradford to buy that ad. So we're going to discount that argument that it's going to take money out of this. It's not going to take money out of this. It's not going to put Black folks on the bench. That's not what House Bill 38 is going to do. And there is no geographic diversity issue on the bench. The other thing you should know is that our appellate courts is the final arbiters, right? That's where after someone had lost a lower court case, like in the common pleas, and they tried to appeal it to the higher courts. There is regional diversity in your common pleas. You get to vote for your common pleas judges in Montgomery County. You get to vote for those. Maybe you had a beer with a judge. Maybe you know that judge in the common pleas. You don't need to know the judge and had a beer with that judge who's going to sit on the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. There is no reason to have geographic diversity, although there already is, technically, for the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court is only beholden to two things: the Constitution and the law. They owe us, the constituents, nothing. They are beholden to the law and the Constitution. So if you talk about you want to get some flavor of your region with you, you get that in your common pleas judges. You get that in the minor court judges. For someone to even reach the pinnacle of being a Pennsylvania Supreme Court justice, they probably went to one of the top tier law schools, and maybe they had to live out in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh for a long time and practice law in those big cities to get the experience so that they could become a Pennsylvania Supreme Court judge. So for someone to say that, you know, they need someone from Elk County to sit on the Pennsylvania Supreme Court to bring the Elk County perspective to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court is just not accurate. And for one, I grew up in Chester County. I'm from Westchester, Pennsylvania. And I moved, I moved here to Harrisburg. I live in Dauphin County now, but I bring the values that I learned in Chester County with me to Harrisburg. So it doesn't mean, you know, where you're born or where you currently practice law is supposed to make any difference to our appellate courts. I just want to throw that argument out the window right now. The NAACP is very much in favor of opposing House Bill 38. They've written statements. We have statements that come from these folks who sit at the JIPA table, the Judicial Independence Project of Pennsylvania table. There are more than 50 organizations. We've all joined together to fight back against this bill. Good government groups like Common Cause, Pennsylvanians for Modern Courts, League of Women Voters, even Fair Districts sits at this table. We have Black Voters Matter, the NAACP, environmental groups, the labor, joining us at this table. We may not all agree on all issues, but we all agree that House Bill 38 needs to go away. So that's something we can all agree on. And there's lots of op-eds out there. Many of you maybe have written an op-ed or two or a letter to the editor out there in opposition to 38. I can't tell you who is in favor of it. I've seen one op-ed and it came today from the author of House Bill 38, Russ Diamond. I can't tell you any organization that's in favor of this. That was a bad vetting job by the folks there in office trying to move this on us. And they thought they were going to do it without us paying attention. That's the other thing. They're trying to move this thing so fast, thinking that we weren't paying attention to what they were doing. They're not holding any public hearings about this. They're not asking for any experts to testify about this. They're trying to move this without us paying attention, and we can't let them do that to us. It's too important. I just testified on Martin Luther King Day in a 3-hour public hearing on Zoom. It was public. But has there been a public hearing about this issue? Absolutely not. They've already moved it where this bill is currently right now. They've moved it out of committee, out of the House Judiciary Committee. They only moved it by 1 vote, very close. The next move would be to reach the full House to vote on this bill. It has to pass both chambers of the General Assembly. It has to pass the House and the Senate in order for it to get on the ballot. Okay, so that's what you need to know. It has to pass both in 2 consecutive sessions. So it already passed the last session in the House and the Senate. It needs to pass now in the House and Senate in this session. And because this changes our Pennsylvania Constitution, and Governor Wolf has nothing to do with this and cannot veto this, they only have until February 17th to pass this out of the House and Senate in order to get it on the May 18th ballot. They want to get it on the May 18th ballot because it's supposedly a low turnout ballot election, right? That's why they want to get it done in May. Well, there's some pretty hot races going on in May. There's a race in Pittsburgh for the mayor. You know, there's some hot contested commissioner races. You all might know about that in Montgomery County, right? So there's lots of races that are up in this May election that's going to draw some attention. So maybe they may not want to put this on the ballot in May because of that. They thought they were going to sneak this through. So that's kind of where that bill is right now. It has to pass the House and the Senate by the 17th of February in order to make the May ballot. If we can stop them, we can stop this from hitting the ballot. Those of you out there, I'm looking at your faces, you know here in Pennsylvania, when something gets on the ballot, we say yes. We say yes to ballot questions here in the state of Pennsylvania. It's just what we do. Because if you don't know what you're saying no to, you don't want to say no. Who wants to say no to what they don't know they're saying no to? Or people just don't vote at all. So right now, it's easy for us to do. At this point, we can reach out to legislators, and I'm saying this is easy because we've been doing it. People are doing it all across the state. Thousands of letters have gone into legislative offices. Thousands of phone calls have been made into legislative offices saying to stop House Bill 38. So we have to keep that pressure up. We're in a soft touch mode right now, persuasion mode on our legislators. I'm looking at Montgomery County. You may have more favorable representatives and senators where you live, and they are against House Bill 38. But I can tell you, if you live in Bucks County, or if you have family that lives in Bucks County, there's a lot of Republicans in Bucks County who are trying to get the vote to the right way on this. They voted the wrong way last time, and we're trying to convince them to vote the right way this time. So that's where this bill is. I know I'm doing a lot of talking, but that's what I was invited to do. So the last thing I want to mention, and then I'll open it up to questions, is what can we do about it? So I mentioned the JIPA table. I mentioned the fact that we need to get educated about this issue so you feel confident and comfortable talking to your friends and neighbors about this issue. Because here you are in a Zoom room, 70 of us in a Zoom room listening and learning, but there are more than 7 million Pennsylvanians that need to learn about this issue, right? And we have to reach them all so that they don't do the wrong thing if this gets on a ballot. So you've all been deputized tonight. You must all now reach out to people that you know, people that live in districts that are not yours, where they have problematic representation that needs to vote no on this bill. Reach out to your family in Wayne County. Reach out to your family in Westmoreland. Reach out to your family in Lebanon County. Let them know that we need to vote no on House Bill 38. Many of you may also, want to reach out to other legislators and give them a piece of your mind. They're not going to listen to you. They don't care what you have to say if you are not their constituent. So unless your state representative or state senator is problematic on this, then it does no good for you to reach out to Daryl Metcalf. He probably can't read anyway. So I see someone laughing at that. Thank you for laughing at my jokes. I'm trying, y'all. I'm trying, Carol. I see you laughing, Carol. Thank you. So the only thing you can do is reach out to your legislators and reach out to leadership. They are open game, right? So Senator Corman out in Center County, he's leadership. He's open. You can reach out to him. He's leadership. Let him hear your mouth. Besides that, it's just your state reps. And I can tell you that it went through on a straight, it's almost straight ticket last time. All the Ds voted no. And a few of the Rs came over and saw the light the last time. So we need now 11 more to see the light this time than last time, and 2 in the Senate to see the light this time than last time. So that's kind of what you can do. We're kind of late in the game here. February 17th is coming up very soon. It's less than a month away. And if we can beat them on this and not let them vote on this, we have a real opportunity of stopping this from getting on the ballot. If it gets on the ballot, it's going to cost millions of dollars to defeat that ballot initiative question, millions of dollars. And then you're going to get all these TV ads and things you're going to have to go watch. So let's beat this thing now while we have the chance with our legislators, and not leave it to the ballot in May, where it's going to cost us millions of dollars and lots of time and energy trying to fight it. So I leave you with that. I know I had Phyllis on an earlier call today, very upset, wanted me to make sure that I talk about how this is a power grab, how this is something we should not allow and stand for. And this is where I am. Like I mentioned earlier with Sarah, I've gone to jail 3 times trying to protect the independent judiciary. I've never been in trouble in my life, but I've been locked up 3 times in the last few years trying to defend our courts. And I'll be damned if I allow Russ Diamond out in Lebanon County to tell me I can only vote for 3 judges, when right now I can vote for 31 of them. I am not going to allow anyone to disenfranchise me after the election we just went through in the United States of America, when we watched insurgents storm our US Capitol 2 weeks ago and try to take away our democracy, which we've been defending here for many years. So if you're like me, and I think many of you are, because here you are at 7:30 on a Thursday night when I think there's good TV on right now. But here you are listening to this because you care. So thank you for that, number one. Please reach out to the people you know and educate them about this issue and why they should care about it. I think Sarah and I can't go back to jail anymore because they're going to keep us the next time we go. So please advocate for the courts and the way we can, civil disobedience. There's nothing wrong with civil disobedience, but we can do that without getting locked up. We can continue to write these letters and make these phone calls and have these conversations. So with that, I'm going to open the floor because we've got like 15 minutes for questions that you may have. Now, please keep in mind, I am not an attorney. I do not have Esquire after my name. I am a journalist. I'm a former TV producer, but I know a lot about this issue, enough that I can play an attorney on Why Courts Matter Pennsylvania. So please don't ask me too much that I won't know the answers to, but I'm going to have some answers for you as it relates to House Bill 38. So I see there's questions in the chat box. I don't know, Stephanie.
Yeah, so we're keeping track of the questions, and if you don't mind, do you mind just diving in? Let's start, tossing them at you.
Sure,
So-
talk now. Here we go.
The first question you've already addressed, how we counter a couple of arguments those in favor of this bill are going to make, including diversification of our courts and reducing what some people think is an over-representation of Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. Are there any other arguments you expect those in favor of this bill to make that we can be prepared to counter?
So I think I gave you the big ones. Russ Diamond had an op-ed that came out today in the paper, in Lebanon News. I'm gonna pull it up right now, and because I countered everything that he said today. So number one, Russ says that we have a geographic diversity issue. Geography is not a protected class. When we talked about the Voting Rights Act and why some of these courts had to do what they did down south, that was to protect Black folks and folks of color. Geographic, there is no protection of geography. There's no saying that you have to have a certain amount of people from Elk County in anything. So geography is not a protected class. The other argument that Russ Diamond makes is that all these judges are coming from Philly and Pittsburgh. I just told you it's good parity. 22% of all Pennsylvanians live there. 30% of the judges live there. There's not a lot of Pennsylvania, of Philadelphia or Pittsburgh there. The other thing is that the racial diversity issue, it's not going to address putting folks of color on the bench. And Russ Diamond doesn't care about that anyway. And that we want to, if I can vote for 31 judges, I want to vote for all 31. I don't want to allow the legislative branch to have any undue influence over our judiciary. I don't want Russ Diamond picking our judges. I want us to pick our judges while we're still doing that.
Great. Thanks, Khadija. Can you help us understand just one little nuance related to the bill? So right now there are different numbers of judges in each court. If this goes through, will each court have different regions? Like, are there going to be multiple maps drawn for all the different courts?
So here's the thing, right? So here we are trying to talk about now Republicans care about spending, right? Now we're going to be talking about the deficit in a minute, right? Now we're going to care about that. Well, we're going to have to create some courthouses maybe, or we have to open up a new courthouse in Elk County, open up a new courthouse in Johnstown to account for this. We don't know the answers to these things because it's not a part of any accompanying legislation. But what they want to do is break them up into districts. So Superior Court has 15 judges. They want 15 different districts. So they need to draw a map with 15 districts. The Supreme Court has 7 justices. We'll need to break that up into 7 districts, and they get to draw those districts. The Commonwealth Court has 9 judges. We break that up into 9 districts, and they get to decide what those 9 districts look like. This is just a hot mess, and it's going to cost money to do. It's going to you have to educate the voters on all of this. It just doesn't make any sense. Not for geographic diversity.
Yeah, hear ya. It sounds like a mess. Thank you. And I know we're getting like a bunch of questions on the actual wording of the ballot question. Is it finalized? And if so, are we safe starting to tell people to vote no? Or is there a chance they will flip the wording on us?
So here we go. I'm going to show you what it looks like because it is finalized. So let me show you what it looks like. All right, you can't see this, and that's on purpose because this is what it's going to look like in a newspaper. When you get that 90 days notice, this is the public notice. The language is in here. They've already written it. It has to be approved by Kathy Boockvar, Secretary of State, to go on the ballot. And we already know how they like to word things on ballot. It's like all rainbows and unicorns, and it sounds delicious, and you want to say yes to it. Yes, we know right now that we need to have people say no to it. This is the public notice that appears in 2 newspapers in all 67 counties, 90 days ahead of a proposed change, amendment to our Constitution. It looks like this. I'm telling you, I need to have pictures in my newspaper. This wouldn't catch my attention. I wouldn't read this. Most people are not going to read this. I'm going to stop that. So I want you to see that. So the language is out there for this bill. And yes, we know that we want people to say no on this bill.
Great. Thank you, Khadija. And I think that addresses everybody's question on it. But if people have lingering questions on the ballot question, please keep putting your questions in the chat so we can make sure we answer everything. And let me
Could
go
I
on to
just
another.
add just ask yourself if you noticed that notice that Khadija just showed us, if you saw that in the newspaper last year, because it was there when they passed it the first time in the 2020 session. So if you didn't notice
Very
it, that's what it's
interesting,
going to look like, coming up.
Okay, thanks, Phyllis. So keep your eyes out. If anyone sees it, share it with us. So the other thing that we're getting a couple questions on is advertising. Do you know of any current campaigns to do advertising right now on this bill on TV, on Radiator, either, campaigns to vote yes, campaigns to vote no? And are you aware of any texting efforts that are being organized to defeat this ballot question?
Okay, so there is no like TV campaign at this moment because it's not on the ballot right now, right? It still hasn't even been voted on by the House. So we're still in that mode right now. We're still trying to do our lobbying visits and stop the bill from happening that way. The only campaign that's happening right now is these town halls that are happening across the state. There are texting campaigns that are happening, like folks like Turn PA Blue. I don't know if any of you belong to Turn PA Blue. Pennsylvania Stands Up, and others that are doing patch-through phone calls and outreach where constituents call other constituents so that those constituents call their legislators. So those efforts are happening right now. If you have some time on your hands and you don't mind texting folks and giving them information so they can reach out to the legislators, that is happening. There's nothing on TV. It's nothing that large at this moment. That money won't come in unless this thing goes to a ballot. And then, like I said, you're going to see this all over the TV. But right now, no. The only campaigns that are happening are these educational campaigns you're seeing, all these town halls that are happening. We have one tomorrow, for instance, at 12:30 on Zoom with Representative Malcolm Kenyatta. Many of you know him. He's appeared a lot on MSNBC and other places lately. We're doing a town hall with him. Between all of us here, 64 of us in this room, supposedly someone from MSNBC might be attending the town hall tomorrow. I'll just put that out there at 12:30 tomorrow. If you want to join that to learn some more and have this discussion again, because I'll be doing this discussion again tomorrow. But that's what's happening right now. It's an educational campaign at this time, just trying to inform folks about it because it's being done in secret. And now we are shining a big old light on it.
And are you in all of these efforts? I know you're making such tremendous efforts, and Why Courts Matter is making such tremendous efforts. Are there efforts being targeted at our GOP counterparts that, they're also going to be impacted by this? So are you doing similar events for them? And what else is happening to encourage GOP voters to reach out to their senators and representatives?
A great question. So yes, that's happening. These conversations are all nonpartisan. We've had town halls in the last 3 weeks. We did one specifically in Bucks County where we targeted lots of the Republicans who live in Bucks County to hear this messaging, to hear what's happening, because this is not a good thing for anyone. Gerrymandering is bad for everybody, no matter if the Democrats do it, or the Republicans do it. Gerrymandering is bad. Republicans don't like it. Democrats don't like it. So when you can term this as judicial gerrymandering, that's a bad thing. Here's the other thing about that. There's some Republican lawyers who live in Montgomery County who probably one day would like to see a seat on the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania. But if you live in a gerrymandered district where they'll probably put Philadelphia together with Montgomery County, or maybe they'll lump together Montgomery County and Chester County, it's gonna be a hard road for a Republican to win a seat in a district that includes Montgomery County and Delaware County and Chester County together. So this is an opportunity for those folks, these Republican lawyers who one day want to become a judge. They're going to have to move to Elk County to have a shot at winning a seat on the bench, because you Democrats in Montgomery County and Chester County are kind of ruling things right now. So they may not have that opportunity to win a seat on the bench out of those two counties if they're put together in an area and condense them on purpose, right? Because they've done that in Philadelphia.
Great. Got lots of questions coming at you, Khadija. Can you, I think you mentioned this at the beginning, but can you review it again and be really specific? If this ballot initiative is approved by the voters, who specifically will be responsible for drawing the district boundaries?
The legislature, legislators. And who controls the Pennsylvania legislature right now?
We gotcha. Yep. Our account, the other side. Can you also, and again, I know you've referred to this a few times, but can you maybe just bullet point, list them really specifically? What are the consequences if this initiative, if this ballot question passes?
You'll no longer get to vote for 31 judges. You'll get to vote for 3. This is going to cost the state some money because they're going to have to build some courthouses. They're going to have to educate us as constituents. This is another way for them to disenfranchise us and take power away from our independent branch of government and give it to the legislature because they're mad.
Okay, thank you. There's someone is asking if there are 6 proposed changes to the Pennsylvania Constitution, are they all moving forward together or can they be separated out?
Yeah, so they're only allowed to have but so many amendments to appear on a ballot. They're not supposed to overwhelm us, the voters, on election day with so many. They can bunch some together. For instance, like Marcy's Law, if you go back to Marcy's Law, the whole reason why that was overturned and why they invalidated our votes is because there were so many questions asked with Marcy's Law. Some of them were good. Like there were some things in Marcy's Law I wanted to say yes to, but there were some things in Marcy's Law that were problematic. And so that's why a lot of folks just voted yes for it, because some of the good things were great, but the bad things that were in there were horrible. So they can do the same thing. There's at least 2 other constitutional amendments that are going through right now. I think someone just said there's 6. But yeah, I mean, they had to decide which one they want to put on the ballot here in May. They can't put all 6 on the ballot.
Great, thank you. And I'm trying to ask this as a question, although it's really a statement. I'll just ask you to confirm. Is it true that independents can vote on this ballot initiative too? So we maybe don't want to just target our efforts at Democrats.
Awesome question. So this does make it an open primary for just that question. So if you're an independent, you still can't vote for, who you want in the primary, but you can vote on the one ballot question. So yeah, this is where you can open it up to your friends who are independents or libertarians who don't want to see this. So yeah, there's going to be a lot of campaign if it gets to a ballot to reach out to the independents as well and remind them that they can actually go and vote if they haven't picked a party before the primary.
Great, thank you. And I think I'm gonna pose this last question to you, Khadija, and then ask you to sort of take us out with our marching orders, right? But this question is a perfect segue to that from Joan Rosiak. So thanks, Joan. Let me read it. Is this correct? Our top priority now for action before February 17th is to contact state reps and tell them to vote against House Bill 38.
That's it. That's the marching orders. Reaching out to your legislators, because the other ones don't care what you have to say. If you don't belong to them, they don't care what you say. You can hit up Daryl Metcalf as much as you want. He doesn't care what you have to say. You have to reach out to your own or to leadership. All right, so you can reach out to the House Judiciary Chair, but that's already over because they passed it out of there. So you can reach out to Senator Corman. You can reach out to the House leaders, but yeah, it doesn't make don't waste your time reaching out to other legislators that don't belong to you because they're not going to listen to you. But what it does matter, those of you who are still willing, if your legislator's office, his district office or her district office is open and you feel comfortable making that visit. I don't know if their offices are open there in Montgomery County or not. But if you can get 2-3 people together to do that, that's impactful. Just 3 people calling one office and within 5 minutes of each other about the same issue is a groundswell of public opinion. We don't reach out to our representatives and senators enough. Maybe you contact them when you got a pothole, but nobody reaches out to them when there's real, other issues that need to be addressed. So when you call them and you talk about House Bill 38, number one, they may not even know what you're talking about because they don't know everything, right? These elected officials don't know everything. And maybe because it's being run in secret, maybe they don't know about House Bill 38 or they're freshmen. They were newly elected and they don't know about House Bill 38. So it's important to educate everybody about this, and you could be educating your legislator about this as well.
That's great. Thank you, Khadija. And before we give you a big thank you for tonight, I know in the interest of time, we're going to wind it down. Is there any other call to action that you want to close us out with? Yeah, so if you see behind me here, got the green poster. I don't know if you see that picture. You see that picture of my green poster back there?
That is Baird Rustin, Westchester, Pennsylvania native Baird Rustin. He organized the March on Washington in 1963 without Facebook, without Instagram, without email. He did that. 250,000 people showed up on the mall there in DC for demanding jobs and freedom, right? So we need to make sure that, yes, we had a lovely day of celebration the other day. We have a new administration in place, but our Pennsylvania legislature does not look like the current US legislature right now. We need to make sure that we are staying on top of what's happening in Harrisburg. It's not the sexiest of all of them, but we have to stay on top of what's happening in our PA legislature, because the things they're passing are most impactful into our lives, and it's happening undercover. So make your phone calls, write your letters, send your postcards. Anything personalized is always good. You know, you can get a Zoom meeting with your legislator at this point. You don't have to go to the office. You can ask for a Zoom meeting. Legislators care about what we tell them to care about. They may not even know what House Bill 38 is. You may be doing an education, you may be doing education with them around this. Educate them, tell them why it's so bad. You heard all the myths tonight. I gave you the facts. Please use the facts. We believe in facts and science here. So repeat these statistics to them. All right, that's kind of where I want to leave you. And I want to thank my team here. I got Ricardo and Katie in the chat box sharing all kinds of links and things, and they created some of those graphics you saw. So shout out to them. There's just a lot of people working on this right now. We are not alone. And there's power in numbers, and we just have to come out in full force. I can tell you, I've had conversations with state representatives. They are getting 4,000 calls into their offices right now saying that our election was not fair and was not accurate. I can tell you they're not getting 4,000 phone calls from the other side saying we had a good election, it is accurate. They're not getting those calls. So don't think that there's not folks calling into offices right now saying this is a good idea, because there may be, and we have to outnumber them.
Okay, Khadija, thank you so much for sharing your time, your expertise, all your thoughts with us. We so appreciate it. And thanks to everybody who helped with this event. Adrian, who's managing things behind the scenes, and Phyllis and Nancy and Sarah for doing such a great introduction. We hope everyone will come back for future events. There's lots more information to share, and we hope to do this on a regular basis. So thanks to all, and let's keep at it.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation to present, Lower Merion. Thank you for all the work you're doing. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Khadija. Good night, everybody.